Hi, this is Dr. Nick. I'm the incrementalist here with incremental insights for better business, better health.
And I'm Fred Goldstein, working with Nick on helping companies reopen during the COVID pandemic. So, Nick, we're coming up on this week. It's Thanksgiving for all of us Americans. You, obviously not hailing from these shores, as you like to say, are not used to these big gatherings, but you do have a gathering, and you've thought a lot about Thanksgiving, and we're trying to get people to sort of do smaller gatherings. So, what are your
Yeah,
thoughts
first of all,
around
I just want to object. Are you calling me not American? Because just
that?
because I don't talk funny like you, right?
It's the difference between not hailing from these shores and
Yes,
not being an American.
it's true. I do talk about hailing from these shores. I probably think that that's a very non-American term. So yes, that's true. So yes, that's been the case, and I think I shared in one of the previous discussions that my first Thanksgiving was pretty much the experience that I had with all my family, which was thanks what? What are you talking about? So the family that I do have is international. They don't celebrate. It is not a holiday in other countries, and as a result, there's no sort of a draw of all of these people to come and interact. Now, I've had the fortune of having my parents here one time. They had a great time, but as far as they were concerned, I think it was more like Christmas because a lot of the food is very similar. But we've always had a relatively small. It's been our family unit, so the two adults, parents, and children, and that will be for our purposes the same, although we've got a little bit of distribution. And we've been thinking about this for the last several weeks and how we sort of manage that. And as you bring people into your bubble, you have to minimize risk as much as possible. The question is, for those, depending on how old they are, whether they're in college, in some cases, they're getting kicked out of accommodation, so they've got no choice. If you bring people back in, what do you do? Well, you think about exposure, so pre-isolation, I would call it, and minimizing the risk in terms of all the things that you do. So maybe actually in the case of one of my children wearing N95 masks, in fact, that's the standard in the setting, isolating again from other people, so minimizing to a bubble that essentially is protected, and in some cases tested. And then if there's any question of risk, finding appropriate testing that's done at the appropriate time. So if you think I was exposed today, it doesn't matter which test you get. You can go get a test right now. It's not going to show anything. So thinking about the timing of the testing relative to exposure, and preferably, one of the things here is this is where the rapid test makes such a enormous, positive sense. What's the point in having a test that gives you an answer in 5 days? Well, there's none at this point in time, given that we're 4 days away from Thanksgiving. So finding the right testing that can give you an instant result, and accepting that some of these tests are less than accurate. Then when it comes to the in-home setting, appropriate isolation, if that's your particular methodology. I know, Fred, you've talked about that in great detail and extended sort of detail, and the celebration when you come out of that. The sharing of food is important area. We seem to find that this sharing of utensils is challenging when you have buffet style. That's very much the Thanksgiving style. It's not ours. So distribution of food, and then thinking about the rooms and the air circulation. If you've got the capacity to have fresh air, I think that's obviously appropriate. And then the wearing of masks in the home setting has to be sort of carried out. Obviously, eating and drinking is a particular risk. Not that just the eating and drinking is, but you got to take your mask off to put the food in, and that puts some additional risk. So we've thought a lot about it. There are no easy answers, and I think that's importantly one of the reasons that we have our business, and you can see COVID Insights, Veilig Health, is all about providing that customized thought and thinking that applies all the latest science to deliver the right message and right concepts for you in your particular setting.
Could you address one issue, and it's really coming up a lot now around Thanksgiving? People are getting tested. Like I know yesterday in Jacksonville, thousands lined up to get tested pre-Thanksgiving. But they're then traveling via air or some other public transportation method to that location. How does that impact their relative risk?
Yeah, so this is an ongoing problem. And in fact, there was a paper that I just saw published that talked about pre-testing at the airport, which was negative for the whole population that got onto this plane for an extended period of time. And I think we'll probably talk about this in more detail at some point. But then as they arrived in country, turns out that at least one of those individuals had COVID, but it hadn't been picked up, subsequently was, and had some spread. And, the source of that spread, I think, is important. So there is no zero risk. I think that's the important thing. You can minimize it as much as possible. And I would suggest that in the plane, assuming that you're separated out, is relatively safe. Certainly with the modern planes, all the airflow, very localized, comes from the top, goes down, sucked out, and through HEPA filters. Probably much more risk is in the airport and all those other settings where you end up close to people, masks are coming off. And probably the most important area is if you're going to travel, don't go get food, take the takeout and then sit at the gate in this mass of people with everybody's masks off eating. That's probably your highest risk. If you ate in the food court, which was maybe more distributed, that might even be better. But best of all, if you're going to eat alone or eat with your subgroup to try and reduce it. And if you can, and I know this would appeal to you, Fred, because I know you're a big driver around these big distances, get into the car on your own and don't travel with anybody. Your risk at the gas station and stuff, pretty low. You're outdoors. So
absolutely. Yeah, absolutely. Drive it.
So that's, ultimately, I think it's addressing each of the individual risks, thinking about it in the context. And, maybe there is a question as with that particular group that traveled, you don't just test once. I mean, that's what we're really pushing for. And if I had one big frustration, it's where we are with testing today, 7, 8, 9 months into this, and we still don't have widely available instant, testing. And, that should include home-based testing. I know there's all sorts of trust issues, but the reality is the vast majority of people test it. I'm negative, that's good news. That doesn't, absolve you from doing all the appropriate things. But what it does do is says, I'm pretty low risk. And then I test again tomorrow and gosh, it changes. Then I take appropriate action.
Right. I think Fauci actually said this past weekend in a question specifically regarding the rapid test and doing it at home, just do it. We need to just do it, and I think that's right on target.
I think that's exactly right.
So a really fascinating discussion on this upcoming holiday, Nick. Great talking to you again. I hope you have a wonderful week, and I hope all of those listening to the show as well have a wonderful week, and make it safe. Follow these simple recommendations. We can get small groups together, keep it safer. So thanks so much for joining us. I'm Fred Goldstein, and looking forward to talking to you again next week.
And this is Dr. Nick wishing you a very happy and safe Thanksgiving. I'm the Incrementalist here with incremental insights for better business, better health.